Hi, everybody. Maria Ponzi again. I'm actually trying to rebrand myself to Anna Maria Ponzi, so if you see that in the little brochure, I'm the same person, and most of you know me as Maria, so that's just fine. I am the Oregon Wine Growers Association president this year, and really great to have you all here at this symposium. I hope you've been enjoying the last day and a half or so. Thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of here. I think good. I think some good news, maybe some bad news, kind of the, same old kind of negatives, some things we need to work on, right? Kind of like global warming, small issues like that. But I hope we're coming away with some silver linings and some good things that you guys can take back and, if nothing else, think about how we're going to move on into the next few years of grape growing. I was also really inspired by the DEI panel yesterday too, and so I think there's some good things happening. So we are going to have our annual meeting. We do this every time we have the wine symposium, so we can share with you, our members, and also some of you who are perhaps not members yet, about what we've been working on and what this organization is all about. We're going to give you updates on the state policy issues, which have been very active recently, as well as federal policies updates. And we also have a special leadership award today, too. So I'm supposed to do slides, and I'm not good at this part, so I'm going to try to do it. What is our mission? The Oregon Wine Growers Association is to advance and protect the investments of its members. It harnesses the power of statewide consensus and stands as a vital advocate for the health, growth, and economic sustainability of Oregon's grape growing and wine production community. OWA has a proven track record of being the established and premier advocacy organization representing all facets of the Oregon wine industry. We are purely funded by membership dues, so again, thank you to all of you who continue with your membership. Additionally, the OWS, this particular show also helps us with funds, so thank you for participating in this. We offer state and federal legislative and regulatory advocacy. We constantly are keeping you compliant, at least updating you on compliance issues, guiding you, making sure you are doing all the things that you need to be doing to keep your businesses going and properly and within the guidelines of the state and feds. We offer cost-saving opportunities. Jessica is going to mention some of those things at the end of our meeting, but I already mentioned earlier the health plan that I think is just fabulous, about a 20% savings for small businesses. We also really mainly strive to keep everyone connected and informed. And as my dear friend and colleague, Alex Sokol-Blosser always says, he really thinks of OWA as the convener of our industry, really bringing all voices together from across the state so we have a great perspective so that we can advocate properly for all of you. So we take it very seriously. What have we been doing? Well, we've been around for a really long time, 40 years, in fact. I was reminded that my father was the first president of OWA many, many years ago, back in like 1981. So we've been here for a long time. There has been a history of OWA working with OWB, or the Oregon Wine Board, and previous to that, the Oregon Wine Advisory Board. Together for almost 15 years, we shared resources, trying to just be more cost-effective. But in just the last couple years, in 2020, we were asked to basically define ourselves. So I want to make sure that you guys clearly understand the Oregon Wine Board, that's where all your tax dollars are going. The Oregon Wine Growers Association is, again, membership funded only. So two very different groups. We just kind of, over the years, have been able to work together. That's no longer the situation. It might also clarify why some of you have been confused about what's going on with the Oregon Wine Symposium this year. We had this very concentrated educational virtual symposium a few weeks ago that was put on by the Oregon Wine Board. and we've also now calling this trade show, as it always been shown or called, the Oregon Wine Symposium. This is being hosted by OWA, so hopefully that clarifies things. Next year, we will be here again, Oregon Wine Symposium, put on by OWA. So I know, it all gets very muddy and perhaps very unnecessary, but it's part of the deal. What have we been doing? A lot of work. The constant oversight of taxes, making sure that there's always people who want to raise our taxes, right? I mean, if you may not know this, but there's a lot of folks here that in this state that don't really love alcohol. They don't think wine is the best thing in the world. So we're always having to really watch over ourselves, make sure that there's no increases in our taxes. That's one of our main things. Direct-to-consumer, especially in the last couple of years, has become so important, and you may have recognized that we were able to increase the number of cases you can ship to Oregon residents from 2 cases to 5 cases. That's something that we were able to get through just in the last couple of years. We try to prevent distributor franchise laws. Of course, we've been involved with land use laws for winery activities and events in order to maintain our great stewardship for our land, but also just being responsible neighbors to our other farmers. That's something we've been very active in. Oregon wine labeling regulations, of course, staying up with that, making sure that we are all in regulation, and also ensuring that we protect our brand of all of our regions in labeling. So that's something that we're always looking at. We were involved in the funding of the $2.68 million with OSU's support to provide the smoke testing labs in the last year. Again, just a huge success for us. Of course, the events that you're witnessing today. We also have been involved with the Wine Country license plate. And if you know how that works, monies come in through the license plate. The funding is actually moved through the Oregon Travel Association, Oregon Tourism Association, but it really grants monies back to our partner association. So that has been a really great benefit for our industry as well. So those are just some of the things that we've been doing. We keep working on other things. You're going to hear more about them later. So who are the board of directors? It's been a real privilege to work with these folks over the last few months. Myself, Brian Gruber you met him yesterday at that beautiful smoky tasting we had. He is our vice president, and he is the winemaker at Irvin and Roberts Vineyards down in Ashland. We have Andy Steinman, who is local here, in Dundee with Walter Scott Wines. He is our treasurer. You met our secretary this morning, Burke Robertsons, who's coming in from the Rocks District in Walla Walla, and she is director of wine growing for her family winery, Delmas and SJR. Sorry, Brooke. We also have President Emeritus, kind of can't do anything without Alex around. So Alex Sokol-Blosser, again in Dundee, who maintains presidency, kind of over helping me out. David Beck from OWA Amity Hills, who is the owner of Crawford Beck Vineyards with his wife. We also have Dion Irving from Irvin and Roberts Vineyards in Ashland. We have Craig Camp from Troon, and that's down in the Applegate Valley, and Terry Brandberg from Brandberg Vineyards and Winery in Elkton. So we have folks from all over the state, and I think it's a very important piece, of course, that we always reach across the state. One thing that I love most about our board meetings is that we take the time to hear what is happening in all parts of the state, so we have a sense of the good things that are happening, if there are some good things happening. We aren't hearing about lack of water and wildfires, but we're also hearing about some of the challenges that we're having across the state, and this is really the whole part of learning about all these different regions and how we need to continue to work for all of Oregon. We also have our amazing, before I get to staff, I also want you guys to know that we have our committees. You are always welcome to join committees, so if you have nothing else going on in your worlds, join us for a committee with public policy that's headed up by Alex. The Lunar Committee, or the Land Use and Natural Resource Committee, is Dion and Terry. The Engagement Committee is headed up by Craig, and our Finance Committee is Andy. But again, you know, we can be even better with your input. So if you have time to give, certainly let one of us know. We have this amazing staff of only 2, but they are remarkable. There's one of them, Jessica Blackhart, who is our manager, assistant manager. She's been very, very instrumental in putting together this event. And then, of course, Jana McCamey, our executive director, who has been part of OWA for many years. Additionally, we have these 2 external partners that are just so vital for the work that OWA does. We have Jess Lyons from Davis Wright Tremaine, who's been offering legal counsel to OWA for, I think, over 20-some years, which is just extraordinary. And if you know Jess, he's such an incredible asset to our industry. So we're so fortunate to have Jess. And then also Dan Jarman from the Crosswater Strategies, our lobbyist, who, again, I think Dan's been with us for over 10, 15 years maybe, so he has seen a lot, and these are 2 really essential partners to us, so we're really fortunate to have them still with us. I also want to just remind you that all of the board members are volunteers, and I think sometimes we forget that, but they are volunteers, and they are extraordinary, and I can't tell you how tirelessly they work on behalf of our industry. And if you would just indulge me for a quick minute, I know you're eating, I'm Italian, but I'm gonna ask you to stop eating for a quick second and just indulge me in a quick applause for them and for everybody that works on OWA. Thank you. I didn't know what I signed up for, as I said in my opening remarks. It's a tremendous amount of work, and especially in the short session that we just had, which you'll hear about later, but it's a good little volunteer work if you want to get involved. I'm glad I don't have a full-time job anymore. And now I would like to shift a little bit, and we are going to acknowledge a leader in our state for the 2022 Wine Leadership Award. We established this award back in 2017 to recognize outstanding leadership in promoting the Oregon wine industry through public policy initiatives. We, in the past, have recognized folks like Senator Ron Wyden, Representative Paul Holvey, Senator Annie Rublin, and Senator Jackie Winters. This year, we have selected an individual who was raised in Corvallis, and I guess that's okay. I'm a duck, so I have a little bit of an issue with that, but that's okay. Corvallis is fine. This is Representative Dan Rayfield. He was elected to legislature in 2014. During his first session in 2015, he started down the path as a leader on state budget issues, notably serving as a co-chair of the Joint Ways and Means Natural Resource Subcommittee. He was regarded as a rising star as a freshman member. It was during his freshman legislative year when Rayfield became interested in Oregon's wine industry, fortunately for us. He toured OSU's Wine Research Institute and visited the wineries around the Mid-Valley and got more and more excited about what he saw. During the 2017 legislative session, Rayfield and former Senator Jackie Winters were champions of OWA's Maris Project, which secured $500,000 in state money for wine marketing access programs and research funding. Beginning with the 2019 session, Rayfield became the House co-chair of the Joint Ways and Means Committee, a role he continued through the 21 session. He has always supported OSU's wine research work and was instrumental in securing that $2.68 million to fund OSU's wine grape smoke testing lab during last year's session. And just this last February, Rayfield was sworn in as House Speaker. He has always voted to support OWA's legislative priorities, and today we want to thank him for all those efforts and recognize him with the 2022 Oregon Wine Leadership Award. And please come up. Congratulations. Would you like to say? We're gonna make him say something. We're gonna force him.
First off, thank you. I think the one thing that I would say is just thank you to all of you who participate in the legislative process, participate in educating, frankly, legislators that come from all walks of life into the Capitol. I think the one thing to remember is you do have a legislature that is very diverse in where they come from. I'm an attorney. There are many folks that are educators from all walks of life. Having people who are engaged in the industry to be able to talk and educate a legislature that turns over very frequently is very important to, frankly, getting those kind of collective values that we all share. So I would just say thank you for all of your work, and then take your legislator out to coffee. We're not that bad. Thank you very much.
Thank you. They actually aren't that bad. I've been realizing they're pretty cool people, actually, and they do a lot of work for us. And we do take a lot of the legislators around to wineries and vineyards on a regular basis just to continue that education. So that is part of what we do. Okay, I would like to invite Jana McCain, here she is, to give you a federal policy update. Jana.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to see you and to be together here for day 2. We've got a great update for you from our various partners, and I'm happy to bring to you our federal update. As most of you know, we don't have a lobbying team in DC, so we really capitalize on relationships to help deliver on our federal agenda. That means close relationships with our Oregon congressional delegation and partnering with organizations like the California Wine Institute, the Wine Grape Growers of America, Wine America, and others to really see policy results for our industry on the federal level. So in 2021, I want to highlight a few of the things that we worked on. We helped secure $10 billion for the Wildfire and Hurricane Indemnity WIP Plus program. This is money that can help assist wine growers that were impacted by the devastating wildfires in 2020, and also for those who experienced losses in 2021. Those monies will be distributed through the Farm Services Agency, and we are still awaiting instruction on how that application process will work, but we'll be sure to release details as soon as those are available. We also worked with the USDA Risk Management Agency to make some improvements to crop insurance. We discovered through conversations with our California and Washington counterparts that Washington and Oregon has some different requirements than California and things that we could benefit from. For example, our grape contracting deadline had been January 15th, while in California it was May 15th, so we were able to adjust that to allow more time. In addition, for those who didn't have all of their acreage contracted, all of that acreage would get the established price from RMA. They now allow for a weighted average of those acres that are contract or non-contracted to help you see more economic value from that policy. We also requested, along with our California and Washington wine grower colleagues, for an additional $5 million for smoke impact research. This money would build on the $5.5 million that we've been able to secure to date. Have a very timely update on that from some activities in DC just this morning. So 2 major issues that are lingering from 2021 for Congress are the appropriations for the fiscal year that's going to end at the end of August. So they haven't been very timely in getting the appropriations bills passed. The current funding is set to expire on March 11th, and the current funding levels are still from December 2020. So they dropped a more than 1,000-page omnibus appropriations bill this morning that has bipartisan support, and we should see that pass the House and then Senate in the coming days, hopefully before that March 11th deadline to avoid a government shutdown. They may have to pass another short-term extension to get it through. We don't yet know about the $5 million for the smoke impact research. We know that there's some monies in there, but what the exact amounts are, we're not sure. I was trying to get that from some of our federal partners just before this meeting, but it's a bit too timely. So we'll report out once we know what's in that funding measure. Also, many of you heard about the Build Back Better Act, which was not passed, so this is more the social and environmental domestic agenda for the Biden administration and Democrats. That we may see a scaled back version of that come up for a vote this year, but that remains to be seen. So for OWA, in terms of our 2022 priorities, we really want to ensure that this $10 billion that we help secure for the WIP Plus program, that those funds are accessible for growers. So we're really monitoring that process closely with the Farm Services Agency and communicating out to our members. And if there are any issues, we can work with our congressional delegation to address those. We're, as I said, trying to secure that additional $5 million for smoke impact research. We'll see what that funding level looks like here in the coming days. We were supporting a replenishment of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund to assist restaurants that were negatively impacted by the COVID pandemic. Hearing that that was not included in this appropriations bill, so we are disappointed by that if that's the outcome, since we know that our restaurant partners are still continuing to really struggle. We also want to ensure that there is continued funding for all the Farm Bill programs that really benefit our industry, from the Specialty Crop Block Grants, Specialty Crop Research Initiative, the Market Access Program, which funds international activities for the industry, and many other programs. So that happens on an annual basis through the appropriations process that we follow closely. A bit longer term, we're looking at further modifications to the crop insurance program for wine grapes within the context of the next Farm Bill, which is currently under discussion and development. We're also deeply concerned about the impacts of the illegal cannabis grow operations, particularly in Southern Oregon. There is federal legislation that's been proposed to legalize cannabis. That does not appear to be moving at this time, but really talking with our delegation about the importance of having appropriate federal enforcement response to those issues that are being caused related to water theft, community safety, human trafficking, and competition for labor. Immigration reform is always on our list. The outlook continues to be difficult on that policy, but we continue to press the important need for a labor force for our vineyards, since so much of it is still hand harvested, so that continues to be a priority. And then some TTB issues, I'm not going to delve into those because we have Kelly Luzania from Davis Wright Tremaine who's going to walk through some of the activities at TTB and want to be efficient here with our time today. So lastly, we have a quick political update here on the federal level. It is a midterm election year, if we can all believe it. We're going to see a bit of a report card on the Biden administration and its domestic priorities. Are expecting to see some losses of Democratic seats. The Democrats are really trying to push the Build Back Better Act, even if it's pared down, to show voters that they are delivering strong results for the American public. We'll see how the issues with Ukraine and rising gas prices and all of those issues play out in the midterm election. So with the 2020 census, we did see the 435 House seats be reapportioned, and Oregon is getting a new congressional seat. So we've had 5, and we're now getting Congressional District 6, which is covering large swaths of the North Willamette Valley wine country. We are intending to host candidate forums so that those in the industry can learn about the candidates that are running for that seat in advance of the primary. Also, Representative Peter DeFazio announced that he is retiring after 36 years in the House, where he's been able to gain much seniority and serve as the Transportation Committee Chair. So we are losing a member that is high up in leadership, and that'll be interesting to follow that race down in his district. So that's what I have on the federal front, and I would like to turn it over to my friends at Crosswater Strategies, Dan Jarman and Devin Morales, to give us the state update now that we've ended the legislative session on Friday.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here in person with you all. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your live entertainment during the lunch hour. I'm Devin Morales, and I recently joined Crosswater Strategies after spending a little over 5 years with the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. And prior to that, I actually worked at a small winery and distillery in the Sheridan area, doing primarily compliance work, regulatory compliance work, and working with our distributors. But I did also get to work a harvest season, so I fully understand the work that goes into punch downs and the importance of a clean tank. So I'm joined on stage by Dan Jarman, who many of you know well, and we are excited to give you sort of the 2022 legislative session recap. And, you know, as a part of that, we'll also talk a bit about political activities coming up and government relations work on the road ahead. So on deck for you today in this presentation, we've got the 2022 session recap and specific legislative issues that we worked on for the OWA. And then we've got a regulatory update, sort of some upcoming activities of relevance to the wine industry. 2022 elections, kind of looking ahead to that, and important ballot measures, and just kind of a broad overview of what to expect for the rest of this year and beyond. So, you know, we've got a pretty short window for our presentation this afternoon, and so I'm just going to let you all know that if you want to talk to either of us about anything after the presentation, we'd be happy to chat, and I'm going to hand it over to Dan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Devin, and it's nice seeing a lot of friendly faces. It's always nice to be here at the symposium and talk about sort of our work on behalf of the Oregon wine industry and government affairs. So, as Devin said, the legislature just wrapped up. They just finished their short session, a session that could go no more than 35 days on Friday. It only went 32 days. And that was, you know, quite remarkable, given that there was an interesting dynamic this session. We had a brand new House Speaker. You just saw Speaker Dan Rayfield. He just became the Speaker in February. And he was teamed up with the Senate President Peter Courtney, who has been our longest-serving Senate President. And it will be his last session. So it was, you know, remarkable in the sense that you sort of brought in the new and taking out the old with Senate President Courtney. The big signature issue this last session was passing ag overtime, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But that was the signature issue for the Democrats who control the legislature. That was their top priority, and made it clear from day one that this is something that they were going to pass. The other sort of big news item that this legislature did is they spent a lot of money that had come in from the state coffers because of a pretty hot economy, as well as, you know, $2.2 billion that the federal government had given to the states through COVID relief and recovery to give them discretion to spend how they'd like. All of those dollars were sort of one-time dollars, but that certainly makes a legislative session go a little smoother when you have money to spend and can distribute to different priorities throughout the state. There's still some partisan rancor, I think large part because the Republicans feel they don't have as much sort of relevance in the legislature. That's something that's going to spill over in the election cycle, which we'll talk about in a moment. But for the most part, it was a pretty well-run session, and one that's going to sort of serve as sort of an interesting springboard into the next part of the year, which is election year. So let's start talking about a couple issues that were important to the wine industry this session. First was ag overtime. As we shared with you, this was the priority at the session. The Democrats made it very clear that they were going to pass a bill. This was the number one priority for the labor unions, and they basically said, we're going to get down to 40 hours. And that was, you know, that was sort of a line that was drawn in the sand. And what OWA had to do is sort of work within those parameters. Ultimately, the bill passed with a phase-in down to 40 hours. As you can see on the slide, when 2027 gets around, any ag worker working over 40 hours will get that 1.5 times pay. That was one of the things that we asked for, was a long runway to this so we can help transition. Given that this was sort of the priority for the unions and they very much wanted this to get to 40 hours, one of the things that we said and other legislators agreed to was there's got to be some ways to make this there needs to be ways to mitigate this financially for those in the ag industries. And so there's really sort of three pieces of that. First is a refundable tax credits. I won't go into all those details because it really is based on kind of size of an operation. But for those smaller producers, you'll be able to take those overtime costs and go to the Department of Revenue and get a refundable tax credit to be able to mitigate those future overtime costs. It's something that after 6 years we'll have to, through a study, sort of revisit what that program looks like. But there's a commitment by legislators to keep this program whole for as long as possible. and there'll be a lot of work in the future to implement this. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. The one thing I will say is that labor contractors are not eligible to get the credits, but those farmers that use labor contractors are. So that's something that we'll have to work with the Department of Revenue and agencies on, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Additionally, for those that need some sort of support from a cash flow standpoint, there will be a $10 million loan program set up for small farmers to be able to access cash to pay for overtime costs. That's something that will be implemented. And then there's another provision in there that allows farming businesses to elect a 3-year net operating loss carryback on their taxes. So that was the package that came out as it related to ag overtime. We can talk about that later on in the implementation, and I'm now going to turn it over to Devin to talk about some other issues.
All right, moving right along here. So Senate Bill 1520, this bill amended Oregon's bottle bill, and the area of significance to us is that wine in a can is now included in the Oregon bottle bill. The operative date for inclusion of wine in a can is July 1st of 2025, and that's actually the product of some work, some collaboration within the wine industry to get that date pushed back, because the original bill proposed January 1 of 2024. But this additional period of time allows the industry to kind of look at the EPR program that the DEQ is setting up right now, the Extended Producer Responsibility Program that passed during the last regular session, and looking at inclusion of all packaging materials in that program versus having some packaging materials that are, in the bottle bill program, like wine in a can. So, that extended period of time to have that same operative date offers offers time for the wine industry to kind of evaluate what makes the most sense there. And as we get closer to that July 2025 date, we will likely need to see additional amendments to the bottle bill to either, depending on the assessment, remove wine in a can from the bottle bill, or otherwise look at making sure that wine tasting rooms don't end up becoming redemption sites. So the next area of legislation I want to cover for you is the cannabis bills. So we had 4 different bills pass addressing cannabis during this last legislative session, and that is on the heels of some pretty significant work during the 2021 special session on funding and policy, where the legislature really signaled that they're committed to preventing and trying to get better control around illegal cannabis activity. Specifically water issues and labor issues impact our industry, and so that's kind of where our interests are. But this package of bills did 4 main things. So one of the bills actually placed a 2-year moratorium on issuance of new recreational marijuana licenses in our state, excluding laboratories. Another bill placed a moratorium on issuance of hemp registrations. If a county declares a state of emergency relating to cannabis, then they can essentially petition the Oregon Department of Agriculture to do a moratorium within the county for the period of the state of emergency. But that actually sunsets also after the 2023 growing season, so pretty short-lived. Third, there was some work in the water space, so water haulers and sellers now have to, do some additional record keeping related to water, and who they're selling to, who they're hauling to, where they're delivering, and there are some additional penalties for water violations in the cannabis space. And then lastly, for OLCC, they got a new position to combat human trafficking in illegal cannabis grow operations. They've got a coordinator position that was funded, and then some additional monies went to the Criminal Justice Commission so that they can collectively kind of deal with the human trafficking that's going on in primarily Southern Oregon. So, sorry, we're trying to go very quickly here.
A couple other things. I'm not even going to really touch on these because we need to move along, but one thing we'll be able to work with the Department of Agriculture on is sort of a new non-commercial pesticide applicator's license, so you can do some things around your wineries as it relates to fumigating wine barrels and corks with sulfur dioxide, so you won't have to have a full commercial applicator's license. One thing that we'll be looking out for is support for Oregon State and their statewide program. They weren't able to get the full funding through that they got a little haircut back in the 21 session. They weren't able to get their full funding, but there's not going to be any cuts to the wine program, which I think is going to be very interesting, very important for us. So I'm now going to turn over to Devin and just touch on some of the regulatory work we're going to have over the next year before the next legislative session.
Okay, I'll try to go really quickly. I know that Davis Wright Tremaine is going to do some overview of this regulatory work as well, so I'll be brief. So implementation of the Ag Overtime Bill, we've got a lot of different agencies that have different roles in that. The Department of Revenue is going to be tasked with setting up the application process for accessing the tax credits and the refundable tax credits. So, you know, the wine industry will want to be pretty actively engaged in that process to ensure that, in particular, farmers who use labor contractors are able to access the credits, the documentation requirements, meet the need. So that's a project we'll be working on. And then Oregon Department of Agriculture and Department of Revenue will also be standing up that grant loan program to help with cash flow issues. And then, of course, the Bureau of Labor and Industry will be implementing the legislation in pretty short order here to make changes to overtime policy for agricultural workers. The Extended Producer Responsibility Program that I alluded to a little bit earlier, this is the DEQ is implementing that Senate Bill 582, which passed during the regular session, and it requires producers of, you know, packaging materials to manage the waste stream associated with the materials. And so DEQ is going through rulemaking pretty quickly here in the spring. They're going to start with technical advisory group meetings. There will be 2 sessions of those, and also 2 rulemaking efforts around standing up and implementing the Producer Responsibility Program. And so we will want to participate in that, and we're actively working with DEQ to figure out when and how the wine industry should engage. Heat and smoke, we actually had some temporary rules that passed during last summer in response to you know, wildfires and extreme heat. So Oregon OSHA is now going through the permanent rulemaking process for smoke exposure and preventing heat-related illness in the workplace. And actually the public comment period on those rules is open right now and through March 18th. And so we are working with the industry, with leadership team here, and then also with the Oregon Business and Industry to provide comments from the business sector. And lastly, I'll just note, as Dan mentioned, there was the pesticide applicator legislation that passed this last session, and there's a new category of license that is kind of a simpler license that minimizes the regulatory burden for doing sort of simple tasks associated with applying sulfur dioxide to barrels and corks and that kind of thing. If that's the kind of realm of tasks, then your license process will be simplified. So we're working with the Oregon Department of Agriculture on setting up the standards for that new category of license. Again, Mr. Dan Jarman.
All right, so this is a political year. Legislature session is over. This is going to be one of the more amazing political years we've seen. We have an open governor's race. As Janice said, we've got the new congressional districts and Peter DeFazio's open Senate seat. One of the things that we're preparing for is massive turnover in our legislature. You know, we're going to see more than a third turnover in the House of Representatives, probably not so much in the Senate, but there's going to be a lot of new faces in the legislature in this next go-around, and a lot of very competitive seats. Republicans actually believe that given sort of the state of sort of the midterms, that they can actually whittle their way into the supermajorities that the Democrats have in the legislature. And in fact, the Senate Republicans believe they can actually take control of the Senate and create more balance in the state. So that's something that we're going to be watching very closely. It's going to be a political year like we've never seen. And as I said, Peter Courtney's last session, and so we'll see new leadership after this election in the Senate. Just finally, our last slide, sort of looking ahead, given that turnover that we're going to face and all these new faces that don't know much about the wine industry, we're going to have to do a lot of education to let them know what it's like for industries in our wineries and our vineyards, what it's like in a very multifaceted industry in the state that is really value-added agriculture. As we touched on earlier, there's going to be candidate forums that we're going to do for our gubernatorial candidates. There's a crowded field, and we're going to want to make sure those gubernatorial candidates speak to our issues. I think the other thing looking ahead is that there is an anti-alcohol movement in the state that's getting a larger and louder voice. And we're going to have to start, addressing issues from that group. We've already seen that in some of the tax increase proposals, and those will be back. And then just, again, issues affecting us in the future. If this economy cools down and the state doesn't have all the money to spend on priorities, we may be looking at ways to reduce budgets. May mean tax increases, especially if they want to fund drug and alcohol programs. I think with ag overtime this year, you're probably going to see some efforts to unionize workforces in the state, especially in the ag industries. There's always going to be additional climate work, especially focused on the ag industry and what ag can do to help on climate issues. There is a movement to move away from diesel fuels in vehicles, and so that's something that we're going to have to deal with. A lot of farm equipment is diesel focused, and then we already talked about water earlier. So there's going to be a lot of big issues that we as an industry have to face into the future, and having a robust government affairs structure and relationships with key policymakers is going to be very important. So thank you very much for letting us speak with you today, and again, Dev and I will be in the back if anyone has questions afterwards.
Thank you, Dan and Devin. One of the things that we at Davis Wright Tremaine are so grateful for is the ability to work with such great teams at Crosswater. Jan and Jessica, the staff, the board of directors, the community, all the members. It's really makes our job a lot easier because we can be really well informed and not working cross purpose with all our teammates. And speaking of a great team, I've got 4 of our team members are going to speak with you. We're really proud at Davis Wright Tremaine to have what I think is the strongest beverage alcohol, food and non-alcohol beverage and ag lawyers pretty much anywhere in the Northwest, if not beyond. And we put the full strength of our experts at our work for the Oregon Wine Growers Association. And the team works really well together. We actually like each other, which is a plus. We definitely like you and your products, and we're grateful for that too. We've got a presentation here that Christy will talk about some employment issues, Kelly on some of the TTB and labeling and tax issues, Jeff on other regulatory issues on the alcohol side, and Olivia is going to talk about some water issues. And then we've also got Elaine Albridge is here. Elaine, many of you know from our work on land use issues. I don't know if Lauren Johnson's in the room. Lauren works on a lot of real estate issues with us. Sheila Morris and Ali Khandra on USDA and FDA. So the full team, again, is really grateful for the work that the Oregon Wine Growers Association does, and we're really proud to represent you.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you all. I'm Christy Totten. I'm a partner in the Employment Services Group. So I'm going to really briefly just touch on 4 laws that passed in the last year to be sure you're aware of them. The first are amendments to the Oregon Family Leave Act. So this law applies to everybody with 25 or more employees. If you have 25 or more employees, you should make sure that your policies and procedures are updated. Some of the changes include a shortened wait time for eligibility for leave during a public health emergency like COVID. Restored benefits for those who leave work and come back within 180 days. So if you're laying someone off, or if they simply decide to come back to work in your winery or vineyard, they're eligible for their former leave to be reinstated and have a shorter time to become eligible. Third, childcare closure for public health emergency was added as a leave reason. And fourth, the provisions for childbirth and parental leave were made gender neutral. Second law to highlight is the driver's license law. It's unlawful now, it's an unlawful practice to ask for an employee to give you a copy of a driver's license unless driving for work is an essential job function or you have some legitimate business reason to ask for that documentation. Last 2, the Crown Act is part of a nationwide trend to further specify what is discrimination and to eliminate racial discrimination. It simply says that hair textures and hairstyles historically associated with race, that it's unlawful discrimination to make decisions based on that. So the real takeaway here is just to make sure that your tasting room dress code policy doesn't say anything about the way that hairstyles look, or to give that a close look. And then the final are some additional narrowing tweaks to non-competition agreements. So if you have non-competes with maybe your winemaker or director of sales or someone like that, it's become a little more regulated than it already was to have an enforceable agreement. The maximum time is now 12 months. This is as of last May. The minimum salary has been clarified. It's a little over $100,000, and that's going to be tweaked based on inflation. And these agreements are now void, not voidable. So it used to be that if you entered into an unenforceable non-compete with someone, it was still a binding contract unless they fought it, essentially. But now it's just void. You just can't have them. So I will just say before I step aside and let Kelly talk that, similar to what Dan said, we are around after this presentation. So if anyone does have questions, I just would encourage you to grab us. Thanks.
Hi, it's nice to see everyone in person, and I am Kelly Luzania. I'm an alcohol regulatory attorney. I specialize primarily in labeling and tax, so if you hear anything and you have questions about it, feel free to come up to our booth afterwards or shoot me an email. I'm happy to chat through it. So I'm going to talk first about OLCC tax changes. The first one, tonnage tax. So there was a recent change to the Oregon grape tonnage tax. Went into effect this last July in time for the fall harvest. The $25 per ton grape tax was extended to out-of-state wineries who use Oregon-grown grapes and to produce wine if that out-of-state winery also holds some type of OLCC permit, such as direct shipper or self-distribution or certificate of approval. So it's kind of making it comparable to what Oregon wineries are already paying. Another change, the privilege tax rate was raised up to plus or minus 16% alcohol by volume, and that's to keep it in line with the way the TTB was raised with the Craft Beverage Modernization Act. So if you have a 14.5% alcohol by volume wine and you remove it from bond this year for sale in Oregon, you're going to pay that lower tax rate if you do owe tax of 67 cents per gallon. And then the last one for OLCC tax, so there's a recent law that allowed OLCC licensees to file and pay their privilege taxes electronically. That new system, it's called the Oregon Privilege Tax Online, or OPTO. It's been rolled out by the OLCC to a few different types of licensees. Wineries recently began meeting with the OLCC to discuss and demo the OPTO system, and OLCC is working with OWA and other wineries on some adjustments to make sure that the system's optimized. And we expect the rollout date at this point to be sometime this summer. Another OLCC changes, there's some labeling and recycling. Conjunctive labeling, so effective January 1st, 2023, next year, there'll be a new conjunctive wine labeling requirement for Willamette Valley AVA. So any wine that includes on its label a small or nested AVA that's within the Willamette Valley AVA, as of January 1st of next year, also has to include Willamette Valley AVA on the brand label. So keep in mind that the TTB, when you add a new AVA on your brand label, and you have an existing COLA, you're going to need a new COLA to cover that change. So make sure that you allot in some time before January. And another change, this was covered in detail by Eric Chambers. He was here from the OBRC earlier, and Devin mentioned it. So DEQ passed a new law in 2021 that makes almost all product packaging subject to these extended producer responsibility requirements as of July 1st, 2025. But there's an exception from that if you're part of the bottle bill, if you're a beverage container, and last week Senate Bill 1520 passed that's adding canned wine. And so we're going to kind of keep an eye on that and figure out which system's going to work best for Oregon wine. TTB rulemaking. So my last slide is kind of a quick overview about 2 areas of TTB rulemaking that we're keeping on our radar for the next year or 2. Wine labeling and advertising. You probably remember about 4 years ago, Notice 176, TTB published some proposed rules to really overhaul wine, malt beverage, and spirits labeling and advertising. And just a couple weeks ago, TTB published their final labeling rules for spirits and malt beverages, and those are going to be effective March 11th, so in 2 days. And in the intro to that rule, the TTB said that it's working still on the advertising rules and then also on the wine labeling rules because there are a lot more issues raised. And we should keep an eye out for those in the next year. And then finally, the Craft Beverage and Modernization Act. It was made permanent last year, and we're going to look for the TTB to initiate some rulemaking to kind of match up the CFRs with the past statute. So that is my update. If you have questions, please feel free to come up afterwards, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jeff.
Hi there, this is Jeff Giametta, counsel at Davis Wright Tremaine. I work on a lot of alcohol regulatory issues. It's great to be here in person again. It's been too long. Excuse me. We had a little interesting development last fall. In November, President Biden issued an executive order to examine competition in a few different industries in the United States. One of them happened to be the alcohol beverage industry. And they called upon the Secretary of the Treasury to do a study and issue a report about competition, the conditions of competition and the market structure. And the Treasury published that report in February. It was interesting. Their observations in this report were based on dozens and dozens of comments submitted by industry members since November. And they saw 2 major trends that kind of rose to the top that are a little bit contradictory. One of them was that we have seen over the past decade a huge explosion in the number of wineries, breweries, and distilleries. I know we've seen that here in Oregon, and the trend is continuing across all the United States. At the same time, there's been a lot of consolidation in the distribution chain, especially across all alcohol commodities, beer, wine, and spirits. And then they also saw some of that consolidation in the beer production tier. The report also says that we don't know if this Federal Alcohol Administration Act really addresses the impact on some of these businesses out there. And a lot of the smaller craft beverage producers are having a tough time entering the markets because of the way the federal rules work, which is pretty good to hear. We haven't seen these rules been examined in quite some time. So the fact that there's attention on them right now is pretty encouraging because maybe we'll see some change out of this. As Kelly just talked about with one of the prior federal rule notices, it's taking a few years to work through it. So, we don't want to get too excited about this yet. It's going to be a while. But the fact that there's attention on it right now, I think, is encouraging. It also mentioned a look at the state laws. And since we have so many different state laws and systems of regulating and distributing alcohol, they did note that some of these state rules may not be helping to support healthy competition. By the way, this is a very quick overview of this report. I think it was a 60-page report, and the comments submitted by industry, as I said, there were dozens and dozens of them. So we can talk about this afterwards if anybody's interested, or there's a lot of articles in the trade press about it as well. I encourage you to take a look at them. I wanted to focus on just a couple of the report recommendations as it relates to this group of winemakers and wine growers. They made a recommendation to TTB to prioritize some of these rules that really do protect public health. That's one of the major functions of TTB, and one of their regulatory charges is to make sure the public is safe. But they also want to kind of reduce the requirements on these small businesses because they're so burdensome. Again, this sounds pretty encouraging. Time will tell what direction and what shape that's going to take. They want TTB to maybe consider updating their trade practice regulations, again, in the spirit of healthy competition. Enforcement priorities was another one that Treasury pointed out. I think I've spoken to this group before about how TTB has been performing their trade practice investigations. They had a significant amount of money added to their budget to go into these trade enforcement investigations, and they did a lot of them. They reported on a number of them. Turns out the folks that they ended up looking into may not have had a huge market impact, or the findings of consignment sales violations that these wineries and other alcohol companies had been engaged in may not have had a huge impact on the overall spirit of competition within the industry, and said, TTB, maybe you want to focus on folks who are doing things that have a bigger impact. Again, that's encouraging to see. They also recommended that the states take a look at their rules and see if they can do anything to foster more competition. We're keeping an eye on this. We're going to see what comes out of it. Treasury is only making recommendations in this report. None of this has the force of law. TTB isn't obligated to do anything in terms of looking at these rules and revamping things, but we're going to keep an eye on it. TTB has a certain amount of time to respond to this report. I think they had something like 120 days from the publication of this report with which to respond. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, looking for, trying to read the tea leaves in whatever TTB says on this, so we can get ahead of anything that we want you guys to know about. And that's about it. Come find us afterwards if you have questions about some of this. And I'm going to turn it over to Olivier now.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Nice to see people in person. My name is Olivier Jamin. I'm an environmental and water attorney at Davis Wright Tremaine. Talking a little bit about land use and water today. It was rather quiet on the land use side in the last year. We did, there was not much in the last legislative session, but in 2021 there was a lot of action on the wildfire side, and there is some grant funding available for building wildfire resiliency on some forested land and agricultural land, as well as also the creation of a wildland-urban interface zone, which might have impact for those who are within those zones on some regulation and availability of funding. And so that's rather quick on the land use side. I'll spend a little more time on water. First, we've talked about this before, but the state continues implementing its clean drinking water program that also applies to certain wineries, and so often that comes up in the renewal of food permits, where the agencies might work with wineries to retroactively permit facilities that qualify as a public water system. So this is always something to keep in mind to make sure that we work early on with agencies and establish good compliance practices. On the water quantity side, there are a couple of things worth mentioning. Last year we talked about House Bill 3103, which is a bill that clarified some of the authority of the Oregon Water Resource Department to change the character of use of a storage water right for those who rely on storage reservoirs that have a right associated to it. This issue came up a few years ago when the department decided all of a sudden that it did not have authority to process transfer for storage water rights as opposed to other types of water rights. This legislative change last year was a quick fix for at least the character of use, but there's ongoing efforts in the legislature and in court to clarify that the department does have in fact the authority to change the location of a reservoir and a point of diversion. This may be relevant in the case where you have an aging reservoir, we want to modernize your water infrastructure, you need to make some changes to this, and right now you can't establish a temporary storage point because the department will say you don't have authority to change that location. So it's an important issue for users that rely on storage water rights. Another issue on the water quantity side is for people who rely on exempt wells. Under Oregon water law, you typically need the water rights to use water for irrigation and other uses, but there are exceptions for certain exempt uses, including those under 5,000 gallons per day for commercial and industrial uses and 15,000 gallons a day for domestic uses. Some people rely on those exempt wells for smaller operation. We've seen a little more scrutiny from certain water masters looking at those exempt wells and keeping better track of them, mostly because, as you've heard a lot about, water supplies declining, the regulators are looking a little more at trying to get a better sense of how many exempt wells are there right now in the states. Are they actually using below the threshold for exemptions? And if not, this is something that users should be looking into to make sure that they secure adequate resources moving forward if they're using more than the allowed exemption. On the water quality side, rules were ongoing last year to adopt the new NPDES stormwater discharge permit. Those rules were adopted, and there are a few key changes that are mentioned here, including a new framework for managing elevated levels of certain pollutants in stormwater discharges. This is interesting to keep track of. In California especially, we've seen a lot of activities with some environmental organizations going after wineries in the stormwater discharge and alleging violations of the Clean Water Act, bringing notice of intent to sue under the Clean Water Act. It's been mostly in California. We haven't seen that too much in Oregon, but worth keeping track of for the stormwater discharges there. That's it really for environmental and water. Again, I'll reiterate, feel free to come talk to us at our booth. I love talking about water almost as much as I love talking about wine, so I'll be happy to talk to any of you at the booth. Thank you.
Thank you, team. And then just as we wrap, come by our booth too. We've got a lot of handouts of sort of the niche questions we tend to get year to year or every year throughout the year from members. One of the services we provide to OWA members is the opportunity to reach out to us and get kind of mailbag level Q&A questions and answers just because you're an OWA member. And we've got some of those resources that have derived from those questions out there. So stop by and say hi, and also meet our new colleague who you may already know as your colleague, Laura Gordon, who's working for us as our industry practice group manager now, and we're really excited about that. Have a great rest of your show.
Well, thank you, Davis Wright Tremaine and Crosswater Strategies, for those amazing presentations. Truly, you guys do a ton of work for us, so thank you. I'm Jessica Blauer, the Assistant Manager of Member Relations and Events. I am going to talk a little bit today about benefits. Now, who here likes saving money? Anybody? Hands are all down. You don't like saving money? Yay, I'll take your money. Just kidding. But I just want to chat a little bit today about all the offerings that we have for our membership. And as Jess just mentioned, one of those benefits is some mailbag questions to them. So these are generic questions like, hey, what is this regulatory issue about? Or, hey, what is this question on this law or that? They are there to help you, and that is part of our membership benefits. The other one that I will mention is FedEx shipping. So they were up here yesterday. They chatted a little bit about their services. They have a program with us as discounted shipping, and Chris Wright is our new representative. He's kind of our go-to man to help us navigate some of those difficult times. I'm sure as you know that there was a lot of issues with this past year with COVID, and if you are looking for somebody to really nail down some good questions to, they are here. They're in the trade show room, so please go see them. And the other one I will take a brief mention of is Gively. So Gively is a charitable giving platform. They are there to help basically standardize any of those asks that come to you. I know we get asked all the time, like, hey, can I have a bottle? Hey, can I have a case? Hey, can I have? This will help you standardize, give them a set of questions to really determine if that's something that you want to help out with or if that you can, and then at the end of the year, track it all. So that way you don't have to do the hard work of going back and checking. I'm going to move along to this last one, which is our presenting sponsor for the symposium. Niedermeyer Risk Management in Providence have graciously helped us with this show, but they are also the managers of our health insurance program, and they have been doing some great work. You can see up there that there is an average savings of 10 to 30%, and this is a huge employee benefit. I mean, that's one of the things to keep and retain and build your team is offering them benefits, and this is something that can help you do that. We have been pleased to see the growth this past year. I mean, it's been just a little over a year, and we have over 50 businesses participating in there. That's great. It's good news. They also just told us that they have a new partnership with another organization called Hub, and that just means that you have more access. There's more locations going through Oregon, and more access means potentially better rates and just being able to catch somebody and get those questions answered. So I would like to give just a minute to do one last round of applause for these presenting sponsors. They have been great partners for us, so thank you. So again, they are also out in the trade show floor. If you have any questions about joining that program or what that looks like for your employees, you can go ask them. Finally, we have our reference toolbox. I don't know if any of you have even looked at this, but online we have a little tab that says reference toolbox. So we've been trying to compile as much information as we can on there. Bits of information here and there about everything, water to compliance to AVAs, you name it. We've been trying to throw it on there so that way it's easy for you to find and you don't have to call us and bug us with any questions that you think is, just a waste of our time. You can take a look on there, and we have some good information, and if you don't see it, then please send us an email or give us a call. We're happy to help. This brings us to my last slide. We earlier had talked about the events, and this obviously being our biggest industry event. We launched a consumer tasting event back in 2019. That was our very first one called Crush on Oregon. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we couldn't hold it these past 2 years, but we're so excited to announce that it's back. So June 5th, it will be held at Castaway Portland, and if you'd like more information, please send me an email, track me down somewhere and say, hey, what is this about? I want to be part of it. We'd be happy to give you more details. So communications, part of my job is also to share some communications. So all those really annoying emails that you get is probably from me. We've been trying to do our best to amp this up, especially in this past year where you've been inundated with communications. We haven't been able to meet face-to-face, so having all of these emails in your inbox, trying to find new ways to communicate, better ways, quicker ways, that is our goal. So as you can see up on the slide, there's been a few new changes. One I'd like to point out is called The Spill. If you haven't checked those videos out, they are short. They're less than 3 minutes long, and we try to pack in everything that's been happening or will happen in the next week into 3-minute videos. So you just pop a headphone in, listen for 3 minutes, turn it off, go on with your day, and then you're informed and you have the ability to make decisions based off of that. Obviously, our monthly membership bulletin goes out once a month. We have all of our grower meetings that we try to attend. Either Jana or I try to be there. So if those are happening coming this summer, please let us know. We'd love to try to make arrangements to join you, to talk a little bit about what we've been doing and how we can help you. And as always, there is our website. Check it out. And if you have any questions, just let us know. That's it.
All right, we're about ready to wrap. Well, thank you to everybody. How do we get all that done, right? It's amazing stuff. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Jana, everybody. I am going to not only make a plug to, if you're not a member yet, it's about time that you become a member. You can see the value that you get from being a member, and it's not really that much money. So take a look at the brochure that's on your table. I'm also going to make a quick little plug for Political Action Committee, our PAC. And this is something that has kind of had starts back and forth over the years, but we feel it's about time that we really get serious about the PAC. As you know, our industry is a multi-million-dollar, I think it's billion, I get scared when I say that, but a multi-billion-dollar economic force for our state. We need to be at the table. We need to have people at the table talking about our industry. You heard from Dan that we've got new policy holders coming in, we've got policymakers coming in, we've got new legislators coming in. We need to make friends. And so we can do that through the PAC. Your company, your business is able to make a contribution, so we encourage you to do that. We're asking for just 10% of your annual dues, so please give that some consideration. I believe there's some information on the tables for that as well. So again, not to hold you up anymore, thank you for your time. Again, encourage you to become a member if you're not, and enjoy the rest of the show. We're gonna have a trade break, and then come back here at 3:20 to hear all about mergers and acquisitions. Woohoo. Thanks, everybody. I hope you're having a good 2 days here. Thanks.